A satellite mosaic sits in a public archive maintained by the United States Geological Survey. The Landsat image mosaic of Antarctica, released in 2007 by NASA, the Geological Survey, the British Antarctic Survey, and the National Science Foundation. At the center of it, where the South Pole should be, there is a hole. The Book of Enoch was never in the Western Bible to be removed from it. Quoted as scripture in the New Testament, then let go of, and for roughly 12 centuries, the West did not hold a copy. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in 1947 at Qumran, 11 separate Aramaic copies of Enoch surfaced. More copies than most books that made it into the Old Testament. Enoch, chapters 33 through 36, describes gates at the ends of the earth. NASA's own imagery has a void at the pole. In the next several minutes, you'll see what the text actually says, what that hole in the mosaic actually is, and what is genuinely unsampled beneath the ice at that latitude. If forbidden biblical history fascinates you, hit subscribe. Every week we take the strangest claims about Scripture and Antarctica and find out what is underneath them. But here's what makes this stranger. Almost nobody making this claim has read the passage. They have read a caption, and almost nobody circulating the photograph knows which satellite took it, or what that satellite could and could not see. Two objects, both real, both public, both sitting in archives you can access this afternoon, and between them, the gap in the map. Start with the text, because the text is older and better attested than most people assume. In Cave 4 at Qumran, west of the Dead Sea, excavators recovered Aramaic fragments of Enoch that scholars catalog as 4Q201 through 4Q212. 11 manuscripts of the same work. Paleographic and radiocarbon assessment places the oldest of them in the 2nd century before Christ, in the composition of the earliest layers, the astronomical book and the Book of the Watchers, earlier still. This is not a medieval invention. It is one of the best attested Jewish texts of the Second Temple period, and it circulated widely enough that the author of the Epistle of Jude quoted it directly and treated it as prophecy. The Aramaic is fragmentary. The complete text survived in one place, Ethiopia in Geza, preserved by a church that never stopped treating it as scripture. In 1773, the Scottish traveler James Bruce carried 3 Geza manuscripts of Enoch out of Ethiopia. One of them, Bodley and Bruce 74, sits in Oxford today. Richard Lawrence published the first English translation in 1821. Robert Henry Charles produced the edition that shaped the 20th century in 1906. Michael Knibb's Oxford edition followed in 1978. Ephraim Isaac's translation from the Ethiopic in 1983, and George Nickelsburg's Fortress Commentary in 2001, which remains the standard. And now the piece that people build their conspiracies on, without knowing the real version, is stranger. The Aramaic Enoch material from Cave 4 was assigned to a single scholar, Józef Mielik, Polish priest, one of the original Dead Sea Scrolls editorial team. Mielik held that material for roughly 2 decades. He published the Books of Enoch, Aramaic fragments of Qumran Cave 4 in 1976, and it was a landmark. But the related Book of Giants fragments, the ones that describe the offspring of the Watchers by name, did not come out whole. Other scholars waited. Some waited their entire working lives. Lorenz Stuckenbrook eventually published a full commentary on the Giants material in 1997, working partly around Mielik rather than through him. Mielik died in 2006. No one silenced him. That is the point. There was no order, no seizure, no threat. A body of primary text sat in one man's office for 20 years because that is how the editorial team was structured, and the field simply absorbed the delay. The suppression people go looking for is usually less dramatic than the reality, and slower and harder to fix. Now the other side. Landsat 7 launched in 1999 into a sun-synchronous orbit inclined at roughly 98 degrees. That inclination is what lets it pass over the same ground, at the same local time on every orbit, and it is also what determines how far south it can look. Landsat 7's imaging reaches to about 82.5 degrees south. Past that, it has nothing. Not blurred, not restricted, nothing, because the sensor never points there. The mosaic built from that data, the Landsat image mosaic of Antarctica, is a composite of more than 1,000 scenes. It is the highest resolution complete continent picture of Antarctica ever assembled at the time of its release, and it is free to download. And at the geographic pole, it has a circle of no data, roughly the width of the missing coverage. That circle is the object at the center of 1,000 videos. Hold on to the number 82.5. It's going to explain almost everything. What we're looking at breaks into 3 parts. What Enoch says about the gates, what Enoch says about the abyss, and what neither passage contains. Chapters 33 through 36 are a travel narrative. Enoch is taken to the ends of the earth in each of the 4 directions and shown gates. In the east, he sees gates of heaven through which the stars come out. Then the north, then the west, then the south, and in each quarter he is shown 3 gates, and through them come the winds. Chapter 36 closes a sequence in the south where he sees 3 gates opened, and through them the dew, the rain, and the wind. That is the passage. Count what is in it. Directions, 4. Gates per quarter, 3. Phenomena, wind and dew and rain and stars. Count what is not in it. There is no distance, no bearing, no degree, no named landmark on the ground. Nothing in chapters 33 through 36 that a surveyor could act on. The astronomical book, chapters 72 through 82, is more systematic and gets cited even more often. It describes 6 gates in the east and 6 in the west through which the sun rises and sets across the year, moving gate by gate as the seasons turn. Modern scholars, Otto Neugebauer among them, read this as a schematic solar calendar. 12 gates, a 364-day year, a system built for reckoning festival dates. It is real ancient astronomy. It is not a coordinate list. Chapters 17 through 19 are the ones that carry the weight, and they are genuinely eerie. Enoch is carried to a place of darkness, into a mountain of fire, into a chasm where he sees 7 stars bound together, like great mountains, burning. He is told these are the stars that transgress the commandment, and that this is their prison, in the place of the angels who took wives. In chapter 21, Uriel is set over the place. Enoch calls it terrible, and asks why, and Uriel answers him. That is real text, and it is worth reading in the original translation rather than a paraphrase. The Watcher's prison is described as a place, and the description is physical. Fire, chasm, binding, a keeper set over it. But the geography around that place, when the text does anchor itself, anchors in the wrong hemisphere for this story. Nickelsburg's commentary traces the journey landscape to the Levant, into Babylonian mythic cartography. Mount Hermon, where the Watchers descend in chapter 6, is a real mountain on the Syrian and Lebanese border. The mountains of fire and the accursed valley in the middle chapters map most naturally onto features around Jerusalem. When Enoch's geography touches ground, it touches ground the author had walked. The mainstream response is simple. The gates are cosmological furniture, standard in ancient Near Eastern literature, and reading them as survey data is a category error. That is a reasonable position, and I think it is largely correct, but it does not fully account for how mechanically precise the astronomical book is. The gate system tracks a real solar year with real seasonal drift. Whoever wrote it was watching the sky carefully and writing down what he saw. The instinct that this text is operational documentation is not crazy. It is just documentation of the sky, not of the ice. There is more than one reading of what Enoch's cosmology assumes. Some hold that the ends of the earth presupposes a plane with a physical limit. Others treat the phrase as a directional idiom for the extreme distances. What neither reading supplies is a number. The gates are counted, they are not located. So the coordinates the text gives are not symbolic. They are absent, and that absence is the first gap in the map. The suppression story people tell about this book is also worth correcting. because the true version is more interesting than the invented one. Enoch was not banned by the Council of Laodicea in the year 364. The canon list attached to that council, Canon 60, does not mention Enoch at all, and the authenticity of that canon is itself disputed among historians. What happened was slower and less deliberate. Jude quotes Enoch as prophecy in the 1st century. Tertullian, writing around the year 200, defends it openly and complains that others reject it. Origen treats it as contested. Jerome, compiling the Latin Vulgate around the year 400, files it among the Apocrypha. Augustine, in City of God, Book 15, argues that its very antiquity makes it suspect, and that the Church was right not to receive it. No decree, no fire. A text quoted as scripture in the New Testament simply fell out of the West's hands over about 3 centuries of accumulating skepticism, and then the West lost the ability to read the languages it survived in. That is not censorship. It is something closer to institutional forgetting, and it is arguably harder to reverse. Ethiopia never forgot. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church kept Enoch in its canon continuously, copied it in Ge'ez for 1,000 years, and it is the only reason we have a complete text at all. In the second story, the Antarctic one begins 12 years before the Antarctic Treaty was signed. Operation High Jump, the summer of 1946 into 1947. 13 ships, roughly 4,700 personnel, the largest expedition Antarctica had ever seen, under Rear Admiral Richard Byrd, and it wrapped up earlier than some planning documents anticipated. The reasons on the record are unglamorous. Sea ice closing in, aircraft losses, including the crash of the George I on Thurston Island that killed 3 men, and the mission's actual purpose, which was training the Navy for cold weather operations against the Soviet Union, not archaeology. Portions of the operational reporting stayed classified for decades, which is exactly what you would expect of a Cold War naval exercise. It is also exactly the kind of fact that survives its context and becomes a mystery. One absence began in late antiquity. The other began in 1947. Only one of them was deliberate, and it was the naval one, and it was about the Soviets. Here's what the declassified pages show, and what the imagery shows, and it is the same answer twice. The hole in the mosaic is the shape of an orbit. A satellite in a near-polar orbit does not fly over the pole. It flies near it, at 98 degrees of inclination rather than 90, and every orbital track it lays down crosses every other track in a tight ring around the pole, and none of them close it. The higher the latitude, the more the tracks overlap, which is why polar regions get imaged more often than anywhere else on the planet. And then right at the center, the coverage stops. That is the pole hole. It is a geometric consequence of the orbit, and every polar orbiting sensor has one, sized by its inclination and its swath width. Landsat 7's is large because its swath is narrow, about 185 kilometers, cutting off near 82.5 degrees south. The imaging instruments on the Terra and Aqua satellites fly at the same inclination, but sweep more than 2,000 kilometers wide, so the mosaic built from them has a much smaller void. And the Canadian radar satellite RadarSat 1 in 1997 did something no optical satellite could. Its operators rotated the spacecraft to look the other way, aimed the radar in toward the pole, and mapped the whole continent, including the point itself. The Antarctic Mapping Mission, the first complete high-resolution image of Antarctica, pole included, and it has been public since the 1990s. The hole moves between mosaics. It shrinks. In one dataset, it disappears entirely. A feature in the ground does not do that. A feature in the sensor does exactly that. And then there is the part that ends the argument without needing any of the above. Amundsen Scott South Pole Station has been continuously occupied since 1956, not visited, occupied through every winter without a break for 70 years. Right now there are people there, and every year on the 1st of January, someone walks out onto the ice with a new marker machined by the winter crew and repositions the geographic South Pole because the ice sheet the station sits on is flowing at roughly 10 meters a year, and last year's marker has drifted off the point. They have to move it by hand every single year. There is no opening at the South Pole. There is a survey stake, an ice sheet in slow motion, and a crew that resets the stake each January because the ground will not hold still. That is the gap in the map closing, not with a denial, with a photograph, a station log, and a length of pipe hammered into the ice. Now, here's where it gets active, because the real inaccessibility is not at the pole, and it is not in any archive, and nobody is hiding it. It is about 1,000 kilometers inland and 2 miles straight down. In 1958, a Soviet seismic traverse crossing the interior of East Antarctica found bedrock rising where the theory of the day said there should be a worn-down plain. Peaks, a range the size of the European Alps, buried under as much as 4 kilometers of ice. They named it for Grigory Gamburtsev. Between 2008 and 2009, an international consortium working under the name Antarctica's Gamburtsev Province flew airborne radar, gravity, and magnetic surveys over that range from 2 remote field camps. The results were published in Nature in 2011 with Fausto Ferraccioli of the British Antarctic Survey as lead author. The topography that came back was sharp. Jagged alpine peaks, deep valleys with a fluvial signature, a landscape that looks like it was carved by rivers and then frozen mid-sentence and buried. Under a continental ice sheet, alpine relief should not survive. It survived. Nobody has ever touched it. Not once. Every fragment of rock we have from the Gamburtsevs came out the long way, as sediment and glacial debris carried hundreds of kilometers to the coast and dredged up offshore. The range itself, the actual bedrock, has never had a drill on it. The logistics are extreme, the ice is thick, and the money has always gone elsewhere. The same is true in different forms elsewhere on the continent. The gravity anomaly under Wilkes Land, described by Ralph von Friese and colleagues in 2006 from satellite gravity measurements. A mass concentration roughly 500 kilometers across that they interpreted as a possible impact structure. That interpretation is contested and has been since it was published, and it is contested for a straightforward reason. Nobody can get to the rock to check. Lake Vostok, sealed under nearly 4 kilometers of ice, breached by Russian drilling in February 2012, and the biological results argued over ever since because of contamination from the drilling fluid. 3 places, 3 unresolved questions, and in every case the obstacle is not a treaty and not a sensor. It is 4 kilometers of ice in the price of a deep field camp. Why is any of that still unanswered 65 years after the Antarctic Treaty was signed? Not because someone is blocking it, because reaching it is genuinely physically hard, and hard is a more durable barrier than secret ever was. Now let me be clear, I'm not saying there is nothing under the ice. That would be the opposite error, and it would be just as wrong. There is a mountain range under the ice that no human hand has ever touched. There is a mass anomaly the size of a small country that we cannot explain because we cannot sample it. There is a lake that has been isolated from the atmosphere for millions of years. What we have to confront is the simplest explanation that fits the evidence. The Book of Enoch is ancient, extraordinary, and gives no coordinates. NASA's imagery has a void at the pole because satellites in polar orbit cannot look straight down at the pole. And the genuine unknowns on that continent are 1,000 kilometers from the spot everyone is pointing at. The evidence sits where it has always sat. Bodley and Bruce, 74, is in Oxford, in Geza, cataloged. The K4 Aramaic is in Jerusalem, under climate control, published since 1976. The Landsat Mosaic is on a government server, free, 400 gigabytes, downloadable tonight. And the Gamburtsev bedrock is under 2.5 miles of ice, and no permit in the world can get you to it, because there is no drill string that long in the field. The passage is still there, in chapter 36, 3 gates opened in the south. The 11 Aramaic copies are still there, in Jerusalem, still fragmentary, still being read. The hole in the mosaic is still there, and still exactly the width of an orbital inclination. The marker at the pole is still there, and someone will move it again this January. And the Gamburtsev Range is still there, sharp-peaked, river-carved, and untouched. Discovered in 1958, surveyed from the air in 2008 and 2009, published in 2011, and in all the years since, not one core has ever come up from it.